This is the motorcycle that created the modern superbike. It was the first production bike ever to break 150 miles per hour, and Kawasaki was so nervous about it, they hid it from the world for 6 years. 6 years of total secrecy. An engine unlike anything Kawasaki had ever built, and a very real fear, not of their rivals, but of what this machine might do to Kawasaki's own best-selling motorcycles. To understand that fear, go back to 1973, the Kawasaki Z1, an air-cooled 900 that made Kawasaki a legend and dominated for a decade. It was the heart of the company's identity. By the early 80s, that lineage had grown into the GPz900R, Kawasaki's brutal, air-cooled flagship. It was their pride, their bestseller, and the machine the whole range was built around. This is the story of how Kawasaki secretly built a machine so advanced it threatened to make its own flagship obsolete, and how that fear shaped one of the most important motorcycles ever made. The early 80s were a turning point. Every Japanese manufacturer was chasing more power, but almost all of them were still using the same basic recipe: air-cooled engines, 2 valves per cylinder. The formula was running out of road. Air cooling had a hard limit. Push an air-cooled engine too far and it overheats, warps, and dies. To make the next great leap in power, you needed something Kawasaki had never mass-produced: liquid cooling. Around 1977, Kawasaki's engineers began a secret project. The brief was simple to state and terrifying to deliver. Build a successor to the Z1 that would leave every rival and every previous Kawasaki far behind. It was codenamed ZX900, and crucially, it would share nothing with any previous Kawasaki. This was a clean sheet, a total reinvention, and that made it enormously risky. The engineers explored everything. First, they considered a straight 6, like their own Z1300, but it was too wide and too heavy. For a sports machine, that was unacceptable. They rejected it. Next, they looked at V4 and even V6 layouts, in the style Honda was pursuing. They studied upgrading their existing air-cooled motors too. One by one, each idea was tested and set aside. The V4 path was tempting, until Honda got there first, and their new liquid-cooled VF V4s proved troubled, with reliability problems. Kawasaki watched and quietly chose a different, safer road. They returned to the inline-4, but reinvented completely. Liquid-cooled, double overhead cams, 16 valves, 4 per cylinder. It would be the world's first 16-valve liquid-cooled inline-4 in a motorcycle. 16 valves meant the engine could breathe far better than any 2-valve rival. More air, more fuel, more power, and higher revs. On paper, it made everything else on the market look old-fashioned. Displacement was 908 cubic centimeters, a deliberate echo of the legendary 900Z1. Bore and stroke of 72.5 by 55 millimeters. Modern, over-square, and built to rev hard. They added something clever, an internal counterbalancer. It canceled out the secondary vibrations that plagued big inline 4s. The Ninja could make brutal power, yet stay smooth in traffic. A rare combination. Liquid cooling brought a hidden bonus. Without the need for cooling fins, the engine could be made incredibly narrow and compact, far smaller than the old air-cooled units. And that unlocked the real breakthrough. During development, engineers realized the compact engine could become part of the frame itself, a stressed member. This diamond frame concept let them delete heavy frame tubes and save enormous weight. Because the engine was so narrow, they could also mount it lower in the chassis. Lower center of gravity, sharper handling. The whole machine was tighter and more agile than anything Kawasaki had built before. Over it all went a sleek aerodynamic fairing. Menacing, dark, purposeful. Some called the styling Darth Vader. It wasn't just for looks. That aerodynamics would help crack a barrier no production bike had touched. A 6-speed gearbox, unusual for the time, helped keep the engine in its power band. Every element was designed to work together as a complete, integrated performance package. Nothing was an afterthought. And here's what makes this story remarkable. All of this took 6 full years. Most motorcycles took 3. Kawasaki spent double the time and kept it almost completely secret the entire way. Think about that level of secrecy. 6 years in an industry full of spies and leaks. As one commentator later noted, it likely couldn't be done today, in the age of camera phones and social media. But why so secret? Part of it was obvious, keeping the technology from rivals, but part of it was internal. Kawasaki had a genuine problem on its hands. This new bike was almost too good. Here was the fear. The compact, lightweight 900 was so effective it could embarrass Kawasaki's own flagship, the bigger, more expensive, air-cooled GPz900R. They risked cannibalizing their own bestseller. On raw peak power, the new Ninja actually made a little less than the GPz900R, around 113 brake horsepower. On paper, the flagship still won. But paper was hiding the truth. Because the Ninja was so much lighter, more compact, and more aerodynamic, it was faster in the real world than the bike above it in the range. Kawasaki had built its own flagship's assassin. Kawasaki spun this brilliantly. They described the Ninja as having the performance of an 1100 with the agility of a 750. It sounded like praise. It was also a quiet admission of the threat it posed internally. In the autumn of 1983, the secret finally ended. Kawasaki unveiled the GPz900R at the Paris show. After 6 years in the dark, the motorcycling world got its first look, and the reaction was immediate. In December 1983, the press launch was held at Laguna Seca in California. Journalists rode it hard on a real racetrack. What they experienced convinced them that motorcycling had entered a completely new age. Then came the headline that stunned everyone. The GPz900R was the first stock production motorcycle to exceed 150 miles per hour. 151, in fact. A number no rival could touch. It was devastatingly quick, everywhere. Testers ran the quarter mile in around 11.2 seconds. For 1984, from a machine you could buy and ride to work, these were staggering figures. And it wasn't just fast in a straight line. Crisp handling, powerful dual front disc brakes, and stability at high speed. It could do everything, and do it better than anything else on sale. The market responded instantly. The GPz900R sold brilliantly. Kawasaki's fear of cannibalizing itself was real, but the sheer demand for the Ninja swept those worries aside. It was simply too good to hold back. It proved itself in competition too. A works GPz900R went straight out and won its class at the Isle of Man TT. This wasn't just a fast road bike, it was a genuine race winner from the start. In America, Kawasaki gave it a name that would become immortal: Ninja. Fast, silent, deadly. It was almost called Panther. Imagine that. The entire Ninja dynasty, decades of it, nearly had a different name. Then, in 1986, something happened that took the Ninja far beyond the motorcycle world. Something no engineer in that secret project could ever have planned for. Hollywood came calling. The film was Top Gun. Tom Cruise's character, Maverick, rode a GPz900R alongside a runway as a fighter jet screamed overhead. It became one of the most iconic images in movie history. That single scene, a grinning, helmetless Cruise racing the jet, sold the Ninja to millions who'd never think about motorcycles. It became a global symbol of speed, freedom, and rebellion. And here's a twist few people know. Kawasaki almost said no to Top Gun. When producers first approached them for bikes, Kawasaki was reluctant. In another reality, Maverick could have ridden a Honda. Kawasaki's US marketing eventually agreed to supply bikes at dealer cost. It turned out to be one of the greatest pieces of accidental marketing in motorcycle history. The Ninja became a movie star. But the fame would have meant nothing if the engineering hadn't backed it up. And it did. That liquid-cooled 16-valve engine wasn't a gimmick. It was the template every superbike would follow. It wasn't perfect. Early bikes suffered from cam pitting, wear on the camshafts, traced to inadequate oil supply. Kawasaki quietly fixed it with wider oil pipes, a hidden flaw in a public triumph. There was carburetor icing too, in cold, damp conditions. The fix, from 1986, was elegant. Route warm water from the cooling system around the carbs. Problem solved, on the move, generation by generation. These fixes tell you something. Even Kawasaki was learning as it went. This engine was so new, so far ahead, that some problems could only be discovered once the world started riding it hard. The rivals scrambled to catch up. Yamaha, Suzuki, and Honda had been left flat-footed with older air-cooled and troubled designs. It took them years to answer the benchmark Kawasaki had set. The Ninja kicked off an arms race. Within a couple of years, machines like Suzuki's GSX-R 750 pushed things even further toward pure race replica sport bikes. The category the Ninja created was exploding. Even Kawasaki moved on quickly. By 1986, they'd launched the bigger GPz900RX as a new flagship. The Ninja that had frightened them internally was already being pushed aside by its own successors. When the ZZR 1100 arrived in 1990, the GPz900R finally lost its flagship crown for good. But remarkably, it didn't die. Kawasaki kept building it because riders simply kept wanting it. Here's the astonishing part. The GPz900R stayed in production in Japan all the way until 2003. 19 years, almost unheard of for a sports motorcycle. The machine Kawasaki feared refused to leave. Why did it last so long? Because the fundamentals were so right. That balance of power, weight, comfort, and usability made it a brilliant all-rounder long after faster bikes appeared. The engine's DNA lived on for decades. That liquid-cooled 16-valve inline-4 layout became the standard blueprint for high-performance motorcycles right up to the present day. It all traces back to this. Every Kawasaki Ninja that followed, the ZX series, the modern Superbikes, even the supercharged H2, descends from this one machine. A 40-year dynasty born from a 6-year secret. It was, arguably, the first true hyperbike before that word even existed. The first to break 150. The first to fuse liquid-cooled multi-valve performance into a complete, usable package. And beyond the engineering, it achieved something rare. It escaped the motorcycle world entirely and became a genuine cultural icon. Ask anyone about the Top Gun bike, and they picture this exact machine. Today, clean, original GPz900RS are increasingly collectible, especially the early bikes and the Top Gun anniversary liveries. Values are climbing as riders realize just how pivotal this motorcycle was. So let's return to the fear. Kawasaki's secrecy wasn't only about hiding technology from rivals. It was about a company that had built something it wasn't sure it could control. They feared abandoning the beloved air-cooled Z1 legacy that had defined them. They feared this new machine outclassing their own profitable flagship. They feared betting everything on unproven technology. Every one of those fears was rational, and Kawasaki pushed through all of them anyway. They chose the bold path, liquid cooling, 16 valves, a stressed member frame, despite the risk to their own business. That courage is exactly why it mattered. A more cautious company would have played it safe, protected the flagship, and stuck with air cooling. And it would have been left behind within a few short years. Instead, Kawasaki's willingness to frighten itself created the blueprint for the next 40 years of motorcycling. Sometimes, the machine a company fears the most is the one it most needs to build. Look at any modern superbike, and you're looking at the GPz900R's grandchildren. Liquid-cooled, multi-valve, compact, aerodynamic, using the engine as structure. That template was set right here, in secret. The bike Kawasaki spent 6 nervous years developing didn't just meet expectations, it redefined them. It moved the goalposts so far that rivals needed years just to reach the new line. Modern superbikes make well over 200 horsepower now, with electronics the 80s couldn't dream of. But strip all that away, and the fundamental recipe is still the one this bike wrote in 1984. It's easy now to see the GPz900R as an obvious classic, but at the time, inside Kawasaki, it was a gamble that kept its own creators awake at night. Brilliance and fear, side by side. That's the paradox at the heart of this story. The motorcycle that made Kawasaki a superbike legend was the one they were most secretive, most cautious, and most quietly afraid of. 6 years of secrecy. The world's first 16-valve liquid-cooled 4. The first production bike past 150. A Hollywood icon. And the founder of the entire Ninja bloodline. The Kawasaki GPz900R didn't just win, it rewrote what a fast motorcycle could be, and set a standard the entire industry would chase for a generation. 19 years in production, 40 years of Ninjas descended from it. A cultural icon that outgrew the sport entirely. All from a machine Kawasaki built in the shadows, unsure of what it had created. That's the real story. Kawasaki secretly feared the GPz900R, not because it was flawed, but because it was so good it threatened everything they already were. They built it anyway, and they changed motorcycling forever.